So I'm sitting here talking to Dale King, who has been a friend of mine since childhood, literally childhood, right? And now we're old, and Dale, you look like you're going a little bit gray. So the listeners
It's
can't
not.
see that. That's not real, or that is
It's
real.
not. It's not just a little bit. It's a lot of it.
You're going. So, Dale and I grew up together in Portsmouth, Ohio. I think it's important for the listeners to hear our side of our hometown. There was a book that was published back in 2015 by Sam Quinones called Dreamland, and it brought into light and perspective of to what Portsmouth, Ohio used to look like before the opioid crises. And Dale, when I called you and asked you to do this interview, we talked a lot about just growing up in Portsmouth. Obviously, I went to Wheelersburg, a little bit of rivalry there, county school. And it just wasn't the Portsmouth that it is today. It wasn't when we were growing up. And that's why it was so important for me to talk to you because, I live in Cincinnati. I chose my neighborhood where the village I live in. It reminds me of Wheelersburg, where my hometown I grew up. And I'm so proud of what you're doing right now in Portsmouth, Ohio, and how you're taking just a really terrible situation, opioid addiction. It's decimated our hometown. And all the memories that I have, I want to restore those into something great because everybody loves a good comeback story, right? So I invited Dale King onto the show today because what he's doing in Portsmouth, Ohio it's unbelievable. I went through your profile and all five of your different sort of ventures that you're doing, and I'll talk a little bit about you. So you're a family man, an entrepreneur, a veteran, a coach, and a proud son of Portsmouth, Ohio. So you're a graduate of Capital University, and then you went to the U.S. Army, and you did 2 tours to Iraq, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about you came back to Portsmouth after you did 2 tours. Is that
Yeah.
right?
So I finished my service in 2007 and moved. Was fortunate enough to move back home. Um, and I left around 1999.
About the same time
So
I did, right?
yeah. So
Okay.
during that time, that's kind of at the height of the opioid crisis. I wouldn't say the height of the opioid crisis, it was the height of the pill mills.
Yes.
And it, like you were saying earlier, um, the town was unrecognizable from my like romantic memories of what it was like growing
Yeah. It's interesting because my kids, when I drive back home, they have a really hard time sort of connecting when you say romanticize because I feel the same way. Like my memories are not of the same town. Even when you drive through, it's like I just want to drive through, get to my mom's or my grandma's, and then drive right back out because it's hard for me to go back home because there's not a lot for me I feel like to go back to. And that's sad
up.
for me. But you're not doing that. You're not living with that. You're turning it into something else. And I want to talk a little bit about that journey and what that looks like because you've taken Portsmouth from the memories that what we have as growing up, and now you're turning it into something that is really remarkable. Tell me a little bit about how CrossFit fits into that story.
Yeah, so I started doing CrossFit in 2007 when I was finishing up my short career in the Army. And it was this kind of like new, hardcore, radical fitness program that at the time it was very popular amongst Tier 1 Special Forces units, essentially because it worked, right?
Mhm.
So it combines all the fitness disciplines into one and celebrates the high intensity aspect of that. So I kind of fell in love with it when I was in the military, and I came back home, and there was nowhere really to do it except for this one place in Columbus, Ohio, that was called Rogue Fitness. Um, so I would drive on the weekends to Columbus and do CrossFit, and that's kind of how much I loved it.
Okay, I have to ask you about that because when I looked at your website and all the different accolades and everything that you've got going on, Rogue Fitness, ironically, I know Bill Henniger
Oh,
from
okay.
college at OU, and I know he started that business, and now you're actually making the kettlebell bells
Kettlebells, yeah,
in Portsmouth, right?
yep,
Because you've
yeah.
partnered
So,
with Rogue Fitness.
well, so how that thing started is fast forward 2020. Um, you couldn't find any fitness equipment anywhere, and Rogue was like the number one U.S. manufacturer of fitness equipment.
Okay.
Kettlebells were being made in China, but everything was shut down. So I remember reading an article about the great fitness equipment shortage, and I've known Bill, like I said, since 2007. And I know some of the people here locally that work at Osco. So Osco is our local iron foundry.
Right.
And I thought, hell, there's got to be a way we can make this here. So I kind of like tested the waters with Osco. They said, yes, that's exactly something like that is exactly what we do. Reached out to Bill, put the people in charge together. And then, I don't know, 6, 8 weeks later, they were making kettlebells in Portsmouth, Ohio.
That's awesome. Good for you. Well, so I want to talk a little bit more about CrossFit, but because you're such an entrepreneur, ironically, one day I was watching Shark Tank and saw this very familiar face pop up in these shorts that I don't even know what to say about. But anyways, they're American flag. If our listeners need to Google you because that was quite the outfit that you were wearing on Shark Tank.
Yeah, they're very
But
revealing.
so Doc Spartan is your business that you
Mhm.
created through the CrossFit gym
Yep.
in Portsmouth, Ohio, and you actually got a deal, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about Doc Spartan and how that's igniting more business in Portsmouth.
Yeah. So, the short answer is everything is built upon the foundation of the gym,
Okay.
through one way or the other. And I, around 2015, I had decided that I was going to quit working for the Department of Energy and kind of launch out on a full-time entrepreneurial basis. I already had the gym going, and just kind of like a happenstance, I looked at who would be my future business partner. She was kind of making all natural creams and lotions on her own and kind of selling them on the side to female members of the gym. And I knew there was a market for like a first aid ointment, especially like in the CrossFit area.
Yeah.
And I had also been working with a lot of adaptive athletes. So these are men and women who are missing their arms or legs or combination of both, whether through combat or accidents. Anyway, so our mission there was to like enable their training in CrossFit or lifting sports. And when you get to know those people, like imagine you're missing your arm, right? So you have a prosthetic. Well, in a high repetitive usage, that's going to build up a pretty gnarly rash the
Yeah.
majority of the time. So, anyways, I knew there needed to be a salve or ointment or something, and asked Renee to see if she could put something together. And she did, and we handed it out to all the members at the gym, just as kind of like a cool like beta test thing. And we were getting things like, "Hey, it worked on my kid's diaper rash, and I put it on my tattoo, and I used it on my scars." I'm like, "Oh, great! Like, looks like we came up with something." That was 2015, and in the summer of 2016, we were out in Hollywood filming an episode for Shark Tank.
God just keeps opening doors. So
Yeah.
you have a Shark Tank deal. You've got your CrossFit gym going. You're oh, okay. So who did you actually get the deal with?
We got a deal with Robert Herschenbeck.
Okay. And the deal is still going on, right?
Yeah, he's still an active member of the company today.
Okay, great. So you have this gym, you're doing CrossFit, now you've got Doc Spartan, and you're living back home and working with, people who have been paralyzed, paraplegic, all different adaptive
Right,
sorts of
yeah.
athletes. Okay.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about the journey from CrossFit and what was the leap of faith that you took CrossFit into drug addiction, opioid usage, and the story behind our dear friend Billy Deaver.
Yes, so we are episode had aired for Shark Tank. This is 2017. We came back, and now it's like fast forward 2018. Our gym just happens to be located down the street from the counseling center. And so, by virtue of proximity, I would always see kind of like large groups of people walking up and down the street
Mhm.
who were addicts, right? And so, I had a very negative stigma stereotype of those people. And like every time I saw them walking by, in the back of my head, I'm like, that's the reason the decline of our town is
Right.
that, is those people right there.
Makes sense.
Kind of in parallel, a friend of mine who's my personal attorney, his name's Billy Deaver. He was like, "Hey, I'm taking a new job as general counsel for the Counseling Center, which is Portsmouth, which is actually Southern Ohio's largest nonprofit behavioral health addiction treatment center." And I didn't know Billy was in recovery. He had never mentioned anything. And he goes, "CrossFit has been instrumental in my own personal recovery. I would love to find a way that we could, if you could give CrossFit classes to our clients." So
So
this
you
was,
didn't know that Billy was in recovery.
no, I had no idea. I had no idea.
So Billy went to undergrad. Is he a Capital Law student? Was he a graduate of
He
Capital?
went he got his law degree from University of Dayton, I believe.
Dayton. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got a smart kid, not unfortunate looking,
No.
successful,
Mm-hmm.
lives in Portsmouth
From a good family.
from a great family of
Yeah.
attorneys, the Devers.
Yep.
Yeah. And he's in recovery and he comes clean to you that he's like CrossFit has been basically instrumental in his process.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next?
So he's like, let's figure out a way that we give classes to people in recovery. So I'm like, yeah, automatic. Yes, I'm here for it. I have no background of being a social worker, being a counselor, being any of that thing. But I know CrossFit is so powerful for people to regain their own capability and confidence. And it was there for me in a time of my life where I was trying to figure out, exiting the military, joining regular society, lost a sense of mission and purpose in my life. And the gym was there for me to fill that void.
Mhm.
So I knew it would work.
Right.
So we started with one class a day, and
So
it
does
really just
this
kind of,
mirror like counseling and working out, or is this just like straight mental health, or is it just physical, or is it both?
so it's both. So
Okay.
for example, if you walk into any normal CrossFit gym, you're going to get a workout of the day. That workout's going to be led by a coach and everything. It's a grouped setting, right?
Okay.
So you're kind of killing, like you're working on your own personal fitness, but you're doing it in a community setting, which is really awesome.
So I had to do research. CrossFit is probably the only one thing I've never done or tried in my life, and I'm a junkie for all things fitness. So I just have it's just I don't know, for whatever reason it was never my thing, but I did notice and it was interesting cuz when I was doing my research, I listened to your TED Talk, which was awesome, and I encourage our listeners to go out and listen to your TED Talk about belief. But I picked up a couple of points where you say there are no mirrors in the gym because you face each other
Mm-hmm.
and pain is only temporary. There's something on your wall. What does it read? Something about
Yeah. So, our motto from day one has been, "Pain is not my enemy; it's my call to greatness."
okay, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have these people coming in and, I'm just completely blown away because I'm thinking about, okay, this is my hometown. I'm, going through all of your social media stuff. And I also noticed it's not just one class, like you're employing people who are former addicts, right? Because I
Yeah.
noticed that you had like a breakfast coffee meeting with some of your staff, and someone was talking about how they were rummaging through the garbage one day.
Yeah. 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 So yes, to get us to that point, we started with those classes, and I had no concept of what addiction was or what it's like to go through addiction. And more importantly, I had no concept of, when you're done with quote unquote treatment, what is the next step in your progression? And so a lot of people need jobs and they need housing. I mean, just imagine if you're at the rock bottom of your life. I mean, you're literally we're doing heroin and being homeless or whatever, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Well, you get clean, 30, 60, 90 days. What are you going to do next? And then more importantly, like who's going to hire? Like you probably have a criminal background, probably have nowhere to live. In a lot of cases, no ID, no bank account, no any of that stuff. Well, if you don't have any of that, what's going to happen? You're going to relapse, or you're going to go back to what you know and all that stuff.
Well, never
So that
mind
was
the
a big
fact that your mental health, you have no self-worth at that point. I mean,
exactly,
and there's not a lot of
exactly.
jobs in Portsmouth, or hadn't been a lot of jobs. I mean, I think things
You're right.
are definitely moving in the right direction now, but not within the last couple of years. And then add COVID into it. That's not helpful.
No, not at all. And so the first guy that like experimental pilot group, his name was Andrew, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I'm done. I want to thank you. This has been awesome." So I'm fired up. I'm thinking like he's going on to something better and great. And he's like, "Tomorrow I got to go check myself into the homeless shelter because if I go back home, I'm going to relapse." And I was like, "Oh." That just hit me because I was like, I don't even know where our homeless shelter is in Portsmouth.
Right.
And I was like, all right, bro, come to the gym tomorrow. I'll give you a broom and a mop, and you can just, we'll figure something out until we find you a place and all that stuff. And Billy's now, Billy's now working. This is kind of his idea. And there's only X amount of transitional beds for their clients to go into. This was around Thanksgiving. And so Billy just like moved heaven and earth to find Andrew a transitional bed prior to Thanksgiving because we thought if he's in a homeless shelter on Thanksgiving, like it's
Yeah.
over with.
Yeah.
But he did, so he got him one. And then so Andrew kind of taught us that like phase one is treatment, right? So that's
Mhm.
getting people in intensive inpatient treatment. Well, phase two has got to be like some sort of hybrid part-time job, part-time counseling. We got to, in order to enable his long-term success, we have to reach our arms around him a little better to help him out.
So there's some hand holding going on.
Yes, there's massive handheld. I would say on an employment standpoint, it's more of a mentorship program than anything else.
Okay.
So yeah, but he was our first one. So that was
Mhm.
2018. Fast forward to today, it's whatever year we're in. I'm lucky enough to have 3 companies, and we employ anywhere from 9 to 14, 15 people across those 3 entities, depending on kind of the seasonality.
So you have the gym, you have Doc Spartan, and then you have um team some assembly required. And you were the co-founder for that. And what is that?
Yeah. So Team Some Assembly Required is a nonprofit that is dedicated to helping adaptive athletes out. So
Okay.
like I said, but the third entity that actually employs people, this is kind of like a hidden one that we don't really talk too much about, but it's called Spartan Solutions Group. And so earlier we talked about the kettlebell thing.
Mhm.
Well, after Osco got the kettlebells up and running, they came they came back to me and were like, "Hey, all these kettlebells require individual packaging, and we're not built for that level of work. We're a foundry. We make things. We ship
Right.
things." And so they're like, "Hey, why don't you just stand up a packaging company for us?"
Oh, just throw up a packaging company. No problem.
And then do it kind of during COVID. And so I was like, "Well, yeah, we can make that happen." And so that's Spartan Solutions Group, and that line of business has gone from simple packaging
Mhm.
to small parts machining.
Okay.
Um, so whatever Osco can't finish in house and need to get it out, so I got 2 guys doing grinding, and I've got 2 guys doing packaging down at the warehouse at the end of the street.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about Billy. So Billy gets you involved in doing at least one class a day. It's mental health, it's physical health. And he's talking about how CrossFit has helped him so much. He's moving and shaking. And then fast forward, because I know how that story ends. If you want to talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah. So Billy and I, as this thing with the counseling center grew, Billy and I's relationship grew stronger as well. Billy was also dating my business partner, Renee. So the three of us, were inseparable. He would always come hang out here. He was my attorney as well. We were always doing everything travel wise with Doc Smart and everything. Billy was always there until he wasn't. And so what ended up happening is Billy couldn't run from his demons anymore, and he ended up relapsing around was around the end of 2020, I believe. And that was so actually what happened is Billy relapsed and he overdosed. And so I got the call because the the building owner knew me. And so I got to go into Billy's apartment right as kind of the paramedics were Narcaning him, kind of bringing him back to life. I mean, he had died. Clinically, he had died, but he came back. And so that was like a massive, massive wake up call. And so
Well,
now, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I'm sorry. And
No.
I it's interesting because, as I was going through all of your stuff and I was sort of looking at the numbers, you talk about the demons, and the numbers are actually worse now today than they've ever been.
Yeah.
And I pulled numbers from your website because I want to talk a little bit about this documentary that you're doing right now in Scioto County. But the numbers from the deaths or overdose deaths by county in Ohio from 2015 to 2020 in Scioto County alone, and this is on your website, it's death per rate of 100,000 population is 83.4. And the
Yeah.
largest targeted age group is the 35 to 44-year-old range. And,
Yep.
when you and I grew up, that's not the town that we knew. And then there's this book that was written by Sam Quinones about the opioid addiction. Ironically, after college, I was selling pharmaceuticals for Pfizer in our hometown against Purdue. Unbeknownst to me, I was calling on those pill mills. I remember every one of those doctors, but I mean, I wasn't selling, I was selling against
Right.
narcotics at that time. But you fast forward to 2022 and the numbers are worse. And so you have this gym, you're reviving our hometown. It's in it's in revitalization time. You've got this best friend who has the world by the tail. How old was Billy?
Early mid 30s.
Mid 30s. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because he was a couple years younger than I was. And he has the world by the tail, and you said he couldn't outrun his demons.
Yeah.
And he was living in your gym practically, helping other people, helping other addicts, and we couldn't save him.
Yeah. And it's yeah, he had saved so many people himself, but at the end of the day he couldn't save himself. Um and I've talked to both of his parents afterwards, and it's a weird thing. Um when you go to a funeral for somebody that's died of fentanyl poisoning or an overdose, it has to be like one of the weirdest emotional experiences because no one really knows how to grieve, right? It's not
Yeah.
like, if Billy had died in an auto accident, um, there could have been a full on celebration of his life, right?
Yeah.
But when somebody dies from a drug overdose, it's this weird, like, is it their fault? Why did this happen? Kind of dark, funky vibe that
Yeah.
goes over the room. Um, and people are left wondering what they could have done to change that.
And I'm sure as one of his best friends, you probably thought that as well.
Yeah, and it's just like, it in a way. I'm very fortunate through my experience in Iraq,
Mhm.
right? Because that as a young early 20s man, kid, boy, whatever, um, you experience death on a scale that is historical at that point. Um, and it teaches you a very important lesson that, you know, every day that you wake up, you're one day closer to death. So you don't know if that day's coming tomorrow. God willing, it's happening 50 years from now.
Right.
But a lot of people aren't guaranteed
Yeah.
that. So you can't live with regrets.
Yeah. So what's
And
the
as Bill,
legacy? What's that legacy here?
so it's funny. My other good friend Chase and some other friends here is whenever we have some wild idea or like, should we do this? Should we not do that? We just say, well, it's what Billy would have wanted.
Mm.
Problem with that is Billy wanted a lot of things.
Yeah.
So uh, it, it lit a fire of immediacy. Like we can't continue to talk about things. Like
Right.
we have to do things because uh, this is what Billy Billy died for in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
do you think that that's your why? Is that your call to action at this point? Is that why you
yeah,
do it? I mean, obviously you're Portsmouth raised and you have a lot of pride for our people, as do I. I mean, I still talk about people from my hometown. I chose my village because it's very similar to Wheelersburg, and I want my kids to experience that Friday
mhm,
night lights and what that feels like.
yeah,
I mean, is that your call to why, or is it Billy? Because, as you and I have been talking, you've done a lot more work with the counseling center. I mean, you have now what, 25 classes a week with the counseling
yeah. Currently, where we're
center?
at, we have 25 classes a week, and we now do classes for their staff, and we're not another. We do classes at a separate facility for them as well. Um, we don't, and I appreciate everything that you've said, Lindsay. I'm just a small part of a bigger thing, and we're just trying to. We don't have a solution for every man, every woman,
Mhm.
but we have a solution for any man or any woman, right? So this isn't something that we're not have something that we could scale across America and treat 100,000 people, but for the handful of people that I'm fortunate enough to spend my time with, it's saved their life.
Yeah.
Um, and
Tell
that's
me
all we
about
really.
tell me about this because, we talked about when I first called you and you said, "Well, I didn't have the foresight in this." I didn't this is not what my vision, and it never is. I lots of life's journeys and paths are not really what we think they're going to be, but that's God. God opens doors. And
Mhm.
I know that you realize I recently ran for office, and I campaigned a lot on and talked to women who had either been in some sort of domestic abuse. And I started a nonprofit for those women. And, my prayer when I first started my campaign was if I just, first of all, A, God, just open the door. And B, if I just save one, it's worth it.
Mhm.
So, I know that you've saved many lives and you continue to save many lives. And now that you've partnered with what used to be Mitchell Lace and where we, distributed and manufactured shoelaces. It was like the only one standing kind of beacon in the middle of Portsmouth, Ohio.
Mhm.
Even my 103-year-old grandmother worked there. It's part of her history. It's now a $30 million facility for counseling, rehabilitation, and now you have a partnership due to Billy because of that, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so you take it one step further because now you're out in Hollywood and you're shopping a documentary called Small Town Strong.
Mhm.
And when you started your gym, you would have never have thought that Doc Spartan would have been a thing. You never would have thought that CrossFit would have been a thing. Now you're saving people's lives, you're revitalizing our hometown, and now you're making a movie. Tell me about this. That's your next gig. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, and that's something Billy was a part of as well. Um, so the issue always became like we knew we had something special, right?
mhm,
Um, in a town that has the longest standing history with abusive addiction, right?
mhm.
We now had some small little way to fight that. And then Billy always pushed us on this is like, okay, well, if it can work here in the absolute worst part of the entire problem, it could work anywhere. Well, then it becomes a matter of scale. Well, how do we scale this program across America for those who are interested or who those think they want to do it? And it just so happened another really good friend of mine moved back to Portsmouth during COVID out of LA and was a filmmaker, is a filmmaker. And we had started kind of slowly putting this project together that would become Small Town Strong. It's years of footage, like from 2017 on.
Oh, wow.
Um,
So Billy's featured in this movie.
Billy's featured in it. Yeah, 100%. Billy's featured in it. And working in Hollywood is a very weird thing. Um, it's
Those are not your
especially
people.
those are those are not my people. And so we had done some meetings with some bigger services and networks, and they quote unquote loved the idea, but it was just too earnest.
Oh,
It was too real. And so uh, I don't know what 107,000 people dying of an overdose a year is supposed to look like, but it is earnest and it is
yeah.
real. Um,
And it
so
needs to
then
be
Billy,
told.
it needs to be told.
Yeah.
And then so Billy died, and my partner in this documentary, Chase, and I were right here when it happened, and both of us were pallbearers on his in his funeral. And we another thing that Billy would have wanted is we built an illegal Viking funeral raft and put it in the Ohio River for him.
Sounds about
That can
right.
kind of, if that can kind of tell you where Chase and I are very similar. Anyways, so we just kind of looked at each other and like, hey, we're not waiting on Hollywood to give us permission to tell this story. So he put up a bunch of money. I put up a bunch of money, and we spent the summer really finishing the final footage, and it's in post production right now. Um, we will be airing on a segment on Kelly Clarkson at the end of this month.
Okay.
Um, and then hopefully we're gonna have something ready by December for film festival submission.
Okay. Wow. I want to say congratulations because it's huge. I don't know if that is appropriate given the context of, you know, what the, what you've had to go through and sacrifice based off of there's a lot of pain, and I'm sure in that story
Yep.
and sadness and grief. But you're right. It's something that it has to be out there. It has to be in the world. That's part of my job right now in interviewing you in this podcast. Um, I have a lot of pride in Portsmouth too, even though I don't live there. And when I was going through all of these numbers and then going through all of your TED Talks and, just I give you so much credit because, the gift that my parents say they gave to my sisters and I was getting away from Portsmouth because they
Mhm.
just felt like there wasn't a lot there for us. And instead of running away from it, you ran right into it. You're running into the fire and you're helping people and you're doing it. I mean, you're doing the work. And I give you a ton of credit for that. And it's really honorable what you're doing. And what other things do you think are important that you want other listeners to learn about either addiction or what you're doing in Portsmouth or people who suffer from addiction and they have family members.
Yeah, to go back to like when Billy died, what does that leave somebody that was close to him with? And unfortunately, I knew we were going down that path. I never thought it would happen. And so a lot of my close friends along with Billy would come to me and say, "Hey man, what can I do? Like I just don't know what to do." Right.
Mhm.
Um, the only thing you can do is live your life in that relationship with somebody who's going through addiction and understanding that they could die tomorrow. So don't allow anything to be unsaid. Don't allow don't live with any regrets. And you have to understand it's their issue they're dealing with.
Mhm.
And it just comes down to something like if you know you're in that bad of a situation, you got to text or communicate with that person daily and just say, "Hey, Billy, I know you're going through it. I'm here when you want to get help." And you do that every day. And it may work or it may not work, but you will know you try to do everything in your capacity for that person. But that person has responsibility in the issue as well.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go on the other side and enable that person.
Right.
Because that won't help the situation out anyways.
Yeah. There's got to be a
Um,
sense of accountability there.
there has to be yes, there has to be a sense of accountability, but there has to be a sense of you're willing to support that person to get them help, but they have to want the help.
Yeah.
And I would say too, it's like be willing to change how you view somebody going through addiction. Because I was able to have a lot in common with people in addiction, not being God willing, not being an addict myself. But addiction stems from previous traumatic events or it's generational in the far majority case of their time. No one that we grew up with decided, "Hey, one day I want to be a heroin user
No,
and
I
I
know.
want to be strung out my entire life." Something has happened that's got them to that point, right?
Mhm.
And so you judging them is not going to help them feel any better. So you got to be willing to have a little bit of compassion. Um, and you just got to be willing to help on a one-on-one basis. And I'd say if we can all start there, maybe 107,000 people won't die either.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and all of your stories with me today. And I'm honored to be able to talk to you and catch up with you. And, you know, I need to plug all of the things that you're doing because once people start listening and learning about you, I want them to be able to find you. I'm going to encourage everyone to go and listen to your TED Talk. And I found this on your website. So give us all of your websites so we can find you, Dale.
Okay, if you want to buy cool things, the
Okay.
best place to go is DocSpartan.com.
Okay.
If you're interested in CrossFit, go to pskcstrong.com. And if you just kind of want to see what wild and weird shenanigans I'm up to, the best place is Instagram, and that's at daleking.740.
Okay. And your TED Talk is on your PSK CrossFit website, correct?
Yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
you can find it through my Instagram bio as well.
Okay. And then the Small Town Strong, I also found you on Instagram, right?
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about the documentary, it's just smalltownstrongdoc.com.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to take my high heels off
You can take your high heels and
now.
politics
Okay.
off since we didn't even talk about politics. But I'll tell you what, maybe there'll be a part two with you and I, and we can talk politics because I know
Hey,
you have some very strong
listen,
feelings on the politics behind what's going on in Portsmouth, Ohio.
let's anytime you just light me up and we'll go for
I
it.
think you're a little busy right now. We'll table that.
All right.
Thank you, dear friend.